There's a particular quality to the first few steps of the day. You swing your legs out of bed, stand up and begin to move, and something feels different, heavier, slower, perhaps a little uncertain. The body that carried you through yesterday now seems to need convincing. If you're over 60, this feeling might be so familiar that you've stopped questioning it. Maybe you've accepted it as part of the deal, the price of another morning. But here's what's worth understanding. What you're experiencing isn't mysterious, and it isn't a verdict. It's a conversation between rest and movement, one that plays out differently for different people, but follows patterns we can recognize and respond to with care. Let's start with what happens while you sleep. For 7, 8, maybe 9 hours, your body holds relatively still. Your joints, those remarkable hinges and pivots that allow you to move through the world, settle into stillness. The synovial fluid that lubricates them, that allows bone to glide smoothly against cartilage, becomes less active. Think of it like oil in an engine that's been sitting overnight. It needs a moment to circulate again, to remember its job. Your muscles, too, respond to rest in their own way. After hours of inactivity, they tighten slightly, shortening just enough that the first stretch, the first step, meets a kind of resistance. This isn't damage. It's not failure. It's simply what happens when tissue that's designed for movement spends extended time at rest. The fascia, the connective tissue that wraps around your muscles like a web, can feel particularly resistant in the morning, as if it needs to be gently reminded of its flexibility. Studies show that many adults over 60 experience some degree of stiffness or unsteadiness when they first start walking in the morning, and for most, this improves as the body warms up. The spine, which has been lying horizontal, needs time to adjust to being upright again. The discs between your vertebrae, which naturally absorb fluid while you're lying down, gradually return to their daytime compression as you stand and move. This is a normal shift, but it can feel unfamiliar if you're not expecting it. But here's where it gets more nuanced, and this is important. While these physical changes after rest are common, they don't tell the whole story for everyone. Some people experience morning walking difficulty because of underlying conditions affecting their joints, their muscles, their balance, or the nerves that help coordinate movement. Arthritis, for instance, doesn't take a break overnight. In fact, the stillness of sleep can sometimes make inflammation feel more pronounced when you first wake up. Balance issues, whether related to inner ear changes or sensory shifts in the feet and legs, can make those first steps feel particularly uncertain. And this matters because morning stiffness alone doesn't point to one specific cause. Two people might both feel heavy and slow at dawn, but for completely different reasons. One might be managing osteoarthritis, another might have subtle changes in their vestibular system, the delicate mechanism in the inner ear that helps you stay oriented in space. Someone else might have age-related changes in proprioception, the body's ability to sense where it is without looking. These aren't interchangeable experiences, even if they share similar symptoms at 6 in the morning. What this means is that the difficulty you feel in the morning isn't always just aging, even though that phrase gets thrown around quite a bit. Age brings changes, yes, but changes deserve attention and understanding, not dismissal. The body isn't failing you by feeling different at 65 than it did at 30. It's communicating. And part of what it might be communicating is that something specific needs care. Whether that's managing a condition, adjusting how you move, or simply giving yourself more time and gentleness as you transition from rest to activity. There's also an interesting layer here that researchers are still working to fully understand. Some scientists have looked at whether our daily body rhythms, the internal clocks that influence everything from body temperature to hormone levels, might play a role in how we feel when we first wake up. The idea is that certain physical processes might naturally be less active in the early morning hours, potentially affecting flexibility, coordination, or pain perception. But here's the honest truth. While this is an area of ongoing research, the evidence isn't yet strong enough to say that body clock issues are a main cause of morning walking difficulty. It's a possibility, a thread worth following, but not a conclusion we can lean on too heavily. What we can say with more confidence is that movement itself often acts as a kind of gentle remedy. This isn't about forcing yourself into a vigorous routine before your body is ready. It's about understanding that motion tends to wake up the systems that support motion. When you walk, even slowly, even carefully, you're asking your joints to circulate that lubricating fluid. You're asking your muscles to lengthen and engage. You're asking your nervous system to recalibrate balance and coordination. For many people, this process of gradual warming up makes a noticeable difference. The first 5 minutes might feel effortful, but by 10 or 15 minutes, something has shifted. The body has remembered. But improvement with movement doesn't mean the problem should be ignored. This is a subtle but crucial point. If walking gets easier as the day goes on, that's valuable information. It tells you something about how your body responds to activity, but it doesn't automatically mean everything is fine or that the difficulty is trivial. Sometimes morning stiffness is the early signal of something that would benefit from attention, whether that's a conversation with a healthcare provider, adjustments to medication, physical therapy, or changes in how you support your joints and muscles throughout the day. The truth is, there's no single explanation that fits everyone, and there's no single solution either. This can feel frustrating in a world that likes clear answers and simple fixes, but it's also a kind of invitation. An invitation to pay attention to what your particular body is telling you, rather than assuming your experience matches someone else's, or that a general recommendation will address your specific situation. Some people find that a few gentle stretches before getting out of bed makes the transition easier. Others notice that warmth, whether from a morning shower or simply from moving in a warmer room, helps their muscles release more quickly. Regular movement during the day, the kind that keeps joints mobile and muscles engaged without overdoing it, often helps people feel steadier and more comfortable over time. But these aren't guaranteed fixes. They're possibilities. Things to explore with patience and without expectation of immediate transformation. And here's something else worth considering. The difficulty you feel in the morning doesn't define the rest of your day. It's a moment, a phase, a beginning. What happens after those first few steps is just as real as the difficulty itself. The body that feels heavy at 7 in the morning might feel capable and strong by 10. This doesn't erase the challenge of those early moments, but it does put them in perspective. Early discomfort is information, not a permanent state. There's also something to be said for adjusting our relationship to slowness. In a culture that often equates speed with health, taking longer to warm up can feel like failure. But slowness in the morning can actually be a signal to listen, not to worry. It's your body asking for a gentler start, for permission to transition at its own pace. This isn't weakness, it's communication. And when we respond to it with patience rather than frustration, we're honoring something important about how bodies work, especially bodies that have carried us for 6, 7, 8 decades. What we're talking about here is a negotiation. Movement after rest is always a negotiation at any age, but it becomes more pronounced, more conscious as we get older. The body doesn't wake up all at once. It unfolds in stages. Circulation increases gradually. Temperature rises slowly. Nerve signals, which coordinate the intricate dance of muscle contraction and joint movement, need time to find their rhythm again. This is normal physiology, not pathology, even when it feels inconvenient. But within that normal process, there can also be signs that deserve attention. If morning difficulty is getting worse over time, if it's accompanied by pain that doesn't ease with movement, if you're experiencing falls or near falls, if one side of your body feels distinctly different from the other, these are reasons to have a conversation with someone who can look at the whole picture. Not to be alarmed, but to be informed. Because while many causes of morning walking difficulty are manageable, They're more manageable when addressed thoughtfully rather than ignored. The research on this, when you step back and look at the overall picture, points to something both simple and complex. Simple in that, yes, morning walking difficulty in older adults is usually linked to physical stiffness and movement changes after rest, often related to joints, muscles, or balance. Complex in that multiple factors can interact, and what's true for one person might not be true for another. There isn't a single cause, which means there isn't a single solution, but there is understanding, there is adjustment, there is the possibility of working with your body rather than against it. So if you're someone who finds those first steps of the day challenging, here's what might help to remember. First, you're not alone. This is a common experience, and failing it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Second, the difficulty often reflects physical processes that respond to gentle, consistent movement. Third, while improvement is common, it's still worth paying attention to patterns and changes, and worth having conversations with healthcare providers if something feels concerning. And finally, the morning walk is less about distance and more about permission to begin gently. There's no timeline for how quickly your body should respond. No right way to feel at 6 in the morning versus 8. What matters is that you're listening, that you're noticing, and that you're giving yourself the time and grace to move in a way that feels sustainable rather than forced. The first steps of the day can feel heavier, yes. But heaviness isn't the end of the story. With patience, with attention, with the understanding that your body is doing its best to navigate the transition from stillness to motion, those steps often become lighter. Not because you've pushed through, but because you've allowed the process to unfold at its own pace, one step at a time.